This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Joining us from New York is Rabbi Glatstein. He's the Rav of Kehillas Tiferes Mordechai in Cedarhurst. He's the author of a number of svarim about the Holocaust, including the Art Scroll book Darkness at Dawn. Welcome, Reb Daniel.
Shalom Aleichem, Reb David. Thank you for the opportunity. Good morning.
So we want to speak about the Warsaw Ghetto, and it's a resistance that became enshrined by in Eretz Yisrael, certainly by the secular Israelis, as a sign of heroism, and how a group of unarmed, basically against the might of the German army, and how long they kept them at bay at great sacrifice. And it was done l'chayr al piatzas gedolim. They say Rabbi Menachem Zemba, the Kajik Lavarav, Rav David Kahana was there, and I understand that your grandfather was the advisor, or not the advisor, was the mashbach, mishamish b'kodesh by Rabbi Menachem Zemba during this period. Can you tell us what your family, what the Kabbalah is, ish b'piyish in your family, about what transpired there?
Look, thank you for the opportunity just to share some very personal memories of what my grandfather told me personally. I heard this from him many times. My grandfather revered Rabbi Menachem Zemba. My grandfather was a resident of Warsaw. He had smicha from the Warsaw Rav, Rosh Dovid Kahana, before the war. He was very close with all the Rabbanim in Warsaw. At the time, as he mentioned, there were three great Go'anei Olam: Rav Shimshon Stackhammer, Rav Menachem Zemba, and Rav David Kahana Shapiro, who he was the third. The Rav David Kahana Shapiro was the youngest among them. And we'll speak about. They were given the opportunity to flee, but Rav Menachem Zemba was the preeminent Gadol Hadar. My grandfather always described what Rav Menachem Zemba's house looked like. Rav Menachem Zemba had more than 10,000 pages of Chiddushei Torah. He had a Svarim Shrank behind his chair, not filled with Svarim, filled with his own personal manuscripts, a commentary on the entire Rambam called Machzei HaMelech, and a commentary on the entire Yerushalmi called Menachem Yerushalayim, hundreds of Tshuvas, Chidushim on the entire Bavli, Shulchan Aruch, and the entire Medrash. So Menachem Zemba was offered to be the Rosh Yeshiva of Chachmei Lublin after Meir Shapiro. He was offered to be the chief rabbi of Jerusalem. He was the Gadol Hadar, and he was the number one address to every pressing shaila in those very dark times. Look, this is a matter of considerable controversy, and it's important to understand why.
They say that he had 19 volumes of Chidushim on the Rambam that were buried in the Warsaw Ghetto, and they could not be found. And I understand many attempts were made to find the writings of. And he was a big correspondent with the Ragacheva, who considered him an equal, amazingly, as well as Rameh Simcha, the Meshech Chachma.
And another point that my grandfather would make, and I want very important to convey, is all those names you mentioned are brilliant luminaries. The midos of Reb Menachem Zemba are lo yu'uman ki yisupar. I heard that he would go to the Ger Rebbe's Tishim, and he would sit in the crowd like anybody else. After one Tish that lasted many hours, the person behind him had his elbow dug into Reb Menachem Zemba's back for hours. And after he saw what he did to Reb Menachem Zemba for hours, he said, I'm so sorry. Reb Menachem Zemba said, no, when we stand in front of the Rebbe, we're all equal. So his midos were otherworldly. And
he was offered, by the way, to be offered to be the Rav of Yerushalayim.
Yes.
Right after Rav Sonnenfeld, but whatever. He was offered to be Rav of Yerushalayim. He was also, like you say, offered to be Rosh Yeshiva in Chachmei Lublin.
Yeah, and besides my grandfather being a Ben Dais by Menachem Zemba, my grandfather was also best friends with Menachem Zemba's two nephews, Avram Zemba and Itchemeyer Zemba, who were both big Talmid Chachamim. Incredibly, my grandfather was with Avram Zemba in Auschwitz, and Avram Zemba passed away 50 years ago, and my grandfather and his best friend Avram Zemba were buried on the exact same day third day of Pesach, 50 years apart. But in any event,
by the way, one more note, Howard. Let's finish here. Reb Chaim Oizer served as the chairman of the Mayetzes. He said he would only do it if Reb Menachem Zimba would do it in partnership. Reb Menachem Zimba was only 45 years old at the time.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. He was the one who spoke at the third Knesset Gedolah. He was the keynote speaker. He spoke twice in front of the entire crowd and was considered the address at the thing was the address of Rabbi Menachem. Just to give people who never heard of him, because he was killed. He was gunned down in the Warsaw Ghetto, right? He left. His children were killed. His son
didn't have any surviving heirs, and his
son was a mechutton with the Chabina Rav. He was a mechutton with the Chabina Rav, but his kids were killed, and there's no surviving grandchild in the world of Rabbi Menachem Zimba.
No.
The only thing we have from him really is Tzeitzai Shabbos.
Garmaz, and Tzeitzai Shabbos.
Yeah.
So, as you mentioned, it's a point of considerable controversy, and for good reason. Look, Ela Varecha Ela Vasusim, V'anachnu B'Shem Hashem Elokeinu Nazker. We never pride ourselves in physical arm and physical resistance. And there were great Rabbanim who were students of Menachem Zimba. Rav Simcha Elberg held that there's no way Rav Menachem Zimba endorsed the uprising. However, all I could say is, and I'm not looking to enter controversy, but my grandfather was there. Not only was he there, he was Menachem Zimba's lookout during the uprising. And my grandfather says certainly Rav Menachem Zimba held it was a matter of Kiddush Hashem. This is reported in writing by Rabbi Feingold. He writes in 1942, Rav Zimba said, "Umitam zeh ani roya shelefi hahalacha mitzvah b'mered b'meitav tachsisei hamilchama kiddush Hashem yeshkan milchemes mitzvahi." That's what Rav Feingold reports. Of course, everybody knows Rabbi Hillel Zeidman likewise said Rav Menachem Zimba held that we could not go voluntarily. We needed to resist. We fooled ourselves into thinking that the outcome wouldn't have been as it was. Actually, my grandfather had a remarkable vision. He just passed away, Dovid, last year at 106 years old. And he said the hardest part about turning 100 was seeing the Rashi Oisiyos. So he had a remarkable vision, and he was Menachem Zimba's lookout during the uprising. So one way they say that you could reconcile what Rabbi Simcha Elberg maintained, that Rabbi Menachem Zimba did not support the uprising with what the other Talmidim.
Explain the debate. Why should you or why shouldn't you? What were the two sides? What did Rabbi Elberg think, and Rabbi Henkin, etc.? Why were they opposed to the Warsaw uprising?
I'll tell you the truth. I'm not here to provide a halachic discussion about that issue. I'm here to tell you the facts based on what my grandfather said. That what is said, what is reported as to why certain Gedolim felt from the outside it wouldn't have been proper is because maybe infuriated the Germans, and it just it hastened the liquidation of the Warsaw Ghetto. But for those who were there and for those who were present, there was a shift in attitude, and this is a very important nakuda, between pre-1942 and post-1942. And this is something we see in the writings of the Pietzetsna. Pre-1942, Pietzetsna Rebbe told us Hasidim, have bitachon, have faith. This is not a new phenomenon. We have to understand the tragedies and the difficulties in the context of 2,000 years of Golus. This is nothing new. We've been through Churim Beis HaMikdash. We've been through Crusades. We've been through Inquisition. And this is just another chapter. We've, been there, done that. But in 1942, when the Germans began the systematic liquidation of European Jewry, the Pietzetsna Rebbe amended his writings, and he said, everything I wrote was ad kan, but mikan olahala. Now what we see, loy shama kamayu, the Jewish people have never experienced anything similar, comparable to this mass extermination. And it suggested that it was under these new conditions that while typically, armed resistance was not the traditional Jewish approach to dealing with the Gullus, we usually tried more discreet diplomatic measures, but uncalled for times, called for uncalled for measures. This was something Rabbi Menachem Zemba viewed perhaps as a hayra asha because of this experience that was just fundamentally and dramatically different than anything we ever experienced before. So Rabbi Menachem Zemba said, this is Milchemes Mitzvah. And look, the answer of the Elberg, Bar Kochel was also a revolt, and Rabbi Kiva supported that. So Rabbi Elberg said, well, that was different. That was in Eretz Yisrael. That was defending their homeland. This was in the Galus. And that may have been the traditional approach until 1942. So again, I'll leave the debate to people much greater than myself. I'm just reporting for the sake of historical record what my grandfather told me, what he told our family, what he spoke about publicly, what he wrote about, what he published. And it's important to know that many of not only the students of Menachem Zemba, but those who were with him, they did maintain that Menachem Zemba, at least in those trying times, held there was an element of hayra asha. So, and this is something I wrote about in the article book, The Darkness and the Dawn. And as we mentioned, there were three Gedolim there in the Warsaw Ghetto. You had Rav Shimshon Stackhammer, Rav Menachem Zemba, and Rav Dovid Shapiro. And I will tell you, I had a great-grandfather who was in the Warsaw Ghetto. My great-grandfather, my grandfather's father-in-law, who he was not his father-in-law at the time, was the last Rav of the city of Sachachav. His name was Rabbi Yehuda Leib Volman, Hashem Yimkom Damai. And he was the last Rav of the city of Sachachav. He was a Talmud of Shem Shmuel. He was taken to the Warsaw Ghetto, and he was given an opportunity to save his skin, to survive. The Aguda was going to rescue him and bring him to America, and they were going to carve out a new position for him, Chief Rabbi of the United States of America. First time that they would have that position. And he turned them down. And he said he's a Roya Neman, he's a faithful shepherd to his Kehillah. Much of Sachachav was taken to the Warsaw Ghetto, and he would not save his life and leave his Kehillah behind. And this is one of the great dilemmas of the Warsaw Ghetto. In 1943, April 19th, 1943, there was an official court case with Rav Shimshon Stackhammer, Menachem Zemba, Rav Dovid Shapiro. They had gotten word from the Judenrat that the Catholic Church of Warsaw were going to save these three Gedolim, and they had 24 hours to escape. And they convened the Bezdin, and because it's Dinei Nefashai, so Poitzchem and Akatan, and Rav Dovid Kahana Shapiro spoke up, and he said, we cannot run away. We can't abandon the people in the darkest hour. We have to encourage them. We have to strengthen them. Could we run from the Almighty? The same God who's found here will be found outside. And those are the words of Rav Dovid Kahana Shapiro. And Rav Stackhammer and Rav Menachem Zemba could not comment. There's nothing left to say. Rav Menachem Zemba said, let there be no further discussion. Tell the Judenrat, we're not leaving. And that was the psak of this, the haunting court case of April 19th, 1943. My grandfather was present in the ghetto at the time, and this is a matter of considerable halachic debate. This was a question posed to the Chazon Ish, by many Gedolim. What should we do? Should we leave our communities, or should we save our life? And the Chazon Ish did not answer directly. Instead, he would always point to a Drushas Chassam Sofer. And the Drushas Chassam Sofer has a very lengthy, in-depth analysis of this particular subject. And the Chassam Sofer says it's very hard to give a definitive ruling. If you read what the Chassam Sofer writes, he is inclined to say that you should save yourself. But, we'll leave that to the reader to see the Chassam Sofer inside. Chassam Sofer says it was actually
the debate is, there's a din always of Chayecha Koidman.
Absolutely.
Right?
Right.
So l'chayr you should say
Mr.
Hayecha
Lichtenstein,
Kaidman should say that they should leave. On the other hand, right, there's two other things that some Sefer discusses. There's a question is, do you say Hayecha Kaidman by Divrei Ruchnius? Right, so here the question is, as a leader of a community, as a spiritual leader, maybe there is no din of Hayecha Kaidman as the leader of a community.
Right. Maybe there's a moral obligation to be a captain. You know,
right,
the
and
captain
you see
can't abandon ship.
Rabbi Chanan came back. They say that the Dvar of Ram, right, was in the Covenant Ghetto. He was the same. He was given the ability to run. He didn't. The Alexander Rebbe, the Radomska Rebbe didn't. On the other hand, the Satmar Rebbe famously did. The Ger Rebbe and the Belzer Rebbe left. So you see that on. And it's interesting to note that the Alexander Rebbe said he's not leaving. He was killed. And sadly, most of the Hasidus Alexander disappeared. Right? So, you know.
But Ger was able to escape. You see the Hasidim that were able to escape.
And he rebuilt Ger. Yeah, so it's a debate. Did they or didn't they? And it hasn't been. You can't really answer such a question.
No.
Rabbi Chanan, you see, Rabbi Chanan came back. Rabbi Chanan came back, and Rabbi Aaron fled. So it's like it was both by the Chassidim and the Lichtenstein. This was a fierce debate.
Yes. The interesting thing is, some Sefer writes that went back to the times of Noda B'Yehuda, where the Noda B'Yehuda himself wanted to leave the city of Prague when Prague was in siege, and the community leaders did not allow him. When the city of Mainz was besieged, the city of Mainz sent Rabbi Chaim Hirsch to Frankfurt. So Chassam Sofer says it's an age-old debate. Chassam Sofer wants to say it was a machlokes Yirmiyah Hanavi and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai fled the city. This is a very interesting makar. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai fled the city. Yirmiyah Hanavi was in jail. He stayed with the people. You could see the Drush of Chassam Sofer, Hey Tammuz, page Shin Hey. So it's very hard to weigh in and to say that one mahalach is better or is not better. I think one thing we could safely say is that those admorim or gedolim who were able to flee and rebuild their yeshivos and chatzeros, so Klal Yisrael today flourishes because of them. But we could equally say that those gedolim that were moiser nefesh al kiddush Hashem, it's their blood and their mesiras nefesh that lay the groundwork for the future, the resurrection and the revivification and resurgence of the Jewish people today. My own great-grandfather died al kiddush Hashem in the Warsaw Ghetto, and it's a source of pride to me, to my family, that he wouldn't abandon the Jewish people in their time of distress.
So,
I mean, what's the greatest accolade is to be a Raya Mehemna, to be a faithful shepherd of the Jewish people.
So, share with us again, what were the words you heard from your grandfather from Rabbi Nachum Zamba's position in the Warsaw Ghetto?
The words were, they were not permitted to go like sheep to slaughter, that was disparaging to the dignity of the Jew. And in order to preserve Kavod Yisrael, they had to wage Milchemes Mitzvah. That's what my grandfather told me. You know, it wasn't a matter of what the result would be. It was a matter of making the statement that we're not going to Shechita house. We're going to stand up for our lives. That echoes the opinion of Rabbi Feingold and Rabbi Seidman, that it's Milchemes Mitzvah and it's Kiddush Hashem.
Well, Milchemes Mitzvah is where you're fighting to save your life. The argument here would be is that by doing this, they were guaranteeing their death, not saving their lives. So Milchemes Mitzvah is a difficult argument, no?
Ma'ani to be nisnas in Oivei HaKoira, but one could humbly assert that if standing up for Jewish pride is Meroimim, Karen Yisrael, Karen Hashchina, Karen HaTorah, it's meroimim the honor and the glory of the Jewish people, where when the Kedoshim went, the same way they didn't die crying, they died dancing in the flames. They died singing Ami Mamin. It's a statement of emunah. It's a statement in belief in the afterlife. Yes, they knew.
That it is, but Mohammed's mitzvah, it's not. I was asking on the point of Mohammed's mitzvah. You're saying
in the
concept of still Hashem. Yeah.
Look, Mohammed's mitzvah, you can't have Mohammed's mitzvah if it's not in Eretz Yisrael.
No. Shulchan Aruch says, Goyim Kifu, they come to the Sapir. The Bach says it has a din of Mohammed's mitzvah, Bizman Hazeh, even Chutzlaretz.
The point that these students of Ramah Hazemba make is it's Kiddush Hashem in the sense that it's standing up for the honor of the Jewish people. So, in that sense, it's a Milchama that you need to do, and in the greater sense, it's Muhammad's mitzvah. I think it would be hard to categorize it as Muhammad's mitzvah according to the strict halachic interpretation.
Unless Rabbi Glatstein, you take the position that if the Jews in Europe as a whole had said, look, you want to take us, every inch we're gonna fight you. Right? If that had been the stance, and there would have been 1 million German deaths along with the 6 million Jewish deaths. So if Rabbi Nachum Zemba was saying this should be our position going forward, so him fighting would have a din of a Mohammed Smith, because in effect he's creating an atmosphere that will allow for less death. Not in his protheistic position, but klali, as he was setting a klal.
Yeah, I don't think
that would make it a Mohammed mitzvah. He's saying, look, you want to take us? Everyone you take is going to come at you with a gun. So then it would have a din of Mohammed mitzvah, not from him, but for the other, for the rest of them.
I think the point was it was limited to the circumstance of the Warsaw Ghetto. It was so that they would not just be liquidated and taken to Auschwitz. It was a point of Jewish pride. Yes, there is a concept of standing up for the honor of the Jewish people. And that's what my grandfather and others maintained that Menachem Zemba held.
And by the way, the other question that you discussed, whether should they leave or should they stay, the Klichemda, another Polish gadol, says Pinchas, the Gemara says he was machnas himself into sakana. Sarah Nisim happened to Pinchas that day, that he himself didn't get killed. So the question is, why was he machnas himself into sakana? And the answer is he was machnas himself into sakana fatzalas Yisrael. So you see that, he was nicely as Brissi Shalom. In other words, he got tremendous accolades for doing that. So he says this is one of the Makairis that you would say that an Adam should be machnas himself into sakana for Atzalas Yisrael. In other words, just as he was, and not he could have said, look, I'm leaving. I want to save myself. So it's just from out 2 Parshas ago, last week's Parsha, we have sort of a riot to this. Rabbi Glatstein, thank you very much for sharing with us your family memory in this matter. It's so relevant these days of mourning for the Beis Hamikdash. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity, and we should Klal Yisrael should only hear B'sras Tovos and safe and good times. Lanu Klal Yisrael.
Amen. Kolta. Bye bye.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.